Good morning, and you are listening to Silent Waves Radio. My name is Alex Mercer, and I need you to stay with us right now, because what we are receiving from our network of correspondence in the last 40 minutes has crossed a threshold that we cannot responsibly keep off the air. We are going to be careful. We are going to be measured. We are going to give you only what has been verified by at least 2 independent sources before we say it aloud. That is our commitment to you, and we are not going to abandon it, no matter how fast the information is moving. What I can tell you right now is this. It is early morning, and significant portions of the northern hemisphere are reporting that the sun has not risen. Not that it is delayed, not that cloud cover is unusually thick. Reports from Tokyo, Seoul, Beijing, Ulaanbaatar, Moscow, Warsaw, Helsinki, Oslo, Reykjavik, and now coming in from the eastern seaboard of North America are all describing the same thing. Darkness. A persistent, total, pre-dawn quality of darkness that is not lifting.
Alex, I want to make sure our listeners understand what we mean when we say the sun has not risen, because those words on their own sound almost poetic. And this is not a poetic situation. People in Tokyo right now, and I'm looking at messages flooding into our listener line. People are standing outside their homes in what should be mid-morning light, and it is dark. Not overcast dark. Not early winter gray. Dark the way 4 in the morning is dark. A woman named Haruki, that's the name she gave us, no last name. She messaged us from Saitama Prefecture outside Tokyo, and she wrote, "I have lived here for 61 years. I know what the sky looks like in every season. This is not weather. Something is wrong with the sky itself. I want you to hold on to that." 61 years of watching the sky, and she has never seen this. That is the kind of testimony we are receiving, and we owe it to you to take it seriously from the very first moment.
We're now receiving a statement from the Japan Meteorological Agency, which was released approximately 22 minutes ago. I'm going to read this in full because partial quotation would be irresponsible here. The statement reads, "The Japan Meteorological Agency is currently investigating an unprecedented atmospheric anomaly across the entire Japanese archipelago. Solar irradiance monitoring stations from Hokkaido to Kyushu are reporting values consistent with pre-dawn conditions, despite current local time indicating that solar elevation should be between 12 and 18 degrees above the horizon. We have ruled out instrument failure. We have ruled out localized weather events. We are coordinating with international partners to determine the scope and origin of this phenomenon. We urge calm and request that citizens remain indoors until further guidance is issued. Updates will follow." That is the complete statement. No cause identified, no timeline given. What is notable is what they are not saying. They are not saying this is temporary. They are not saying they know what is happening. They are saying they have ruled out the easy explanations.
And I think that last part is the part that should make every one of our listeners sit down. Because when a meteorological agency, people who spend their entire professional lives explaining weather, when they come out and say we have ruled out weather, that is an extraordinary statement to make. Alex, I'm looking at our incoming messages board right now, and it is, I want to describe this to you. It is filling up faster than I have ever seen it fill up in 8 years of doing this. We have messages from listeners in Oslo who say it is pitch dark and it is what should be 10:15 in the morning. We have a listener in Winnipeg, Canada, who says his solar panels registered 0 output for the 3rd consecutive hour since what should have been sunrise. We have a message from a nurse in Helsinki who says the hospital she works in has already switched to backup generator power because, and I'm reading her words directly here, the entire city seems to have gone very quiet, and people are starting to gather outside and no one is speaking. That detail, the quiet, I keep coming back to that. When people go quiet, it usually means they are afraid.
We're about 2 hours into our coverage now, And I want to give you the geographic scope of what we are tracking as of this moment, because the scope is expanding rapidly. The darkness, and we are going to use that term going forward as a shorthand for this solar anomaly. The darkness appears to cover, at minimum, the entire landmass from Western Europe eastward through Russia, China, the Korean Peninsula, and Japan. We are also getting unconfirmed reports from Alaska and northern Canada. What we do not yet have is any data from the southern hemisphere that indicates this phenomenon is present below the equator. Daylight appears to be functioning normally in Buenos Aires, Cape Town, Sydney, and Auckland, based on our correspondence there. That geographic boundary is critical. If this is atmospheric, it is atmospheric at a scale and at a precision that defies anything in the historical or scientific record. Our science correspondent, Dr. Vasquez, is currently traveling to our studio, and we expect to have her on the line within the hour. I want you to stay with us.
While we wait for Dr. Vasquez, I want to take a moment to talk about what it means for ordinary people when sunrise doesn't come. Because already 2 hours in, we are seeing the downstream effects. Schools in Tokyo, Seoul, and Beijing have not opened. Road traffic in Moscow is reported to be at a near standstill, not because of ice or weather, but because drivers are understandably disoriented and frightened. Several major airports, including Oslo Gardermoen and Helsinki Vantaa, have issued ground stops for inbound and outbound traffic citing, quote, extraordinary visibility conditions. Now airports have lights, runways have lights. This isn't about literal darkness preventing landings. This is about the fact that air traffic controllers are dealing with panicked radio communications from crews who are questioning their instruments. When pilots start questioning their instruments over something they can see out the window, or rather something they cannot see, that is a safety situation. We have a listener in Oslo, a man named Per, who says he drove to the top of a hill overlooking the city and, quote, there are no shadows anywhere. The city lights are on, but there are no shadows. The light that exists is only from us. There is nothing from above. I want you to think about what that means.
I have just received a bulletin from our correspondent in Moscow, and I am going to read this carefully. The Russian government has convened an emergency session of the Security Council as of approximately 40 minutes ago. A brief statement from the Kremlin's press office indicates that the president has been briefed and that military assets are, quote, being repositioned to ensure public order and infrastructure protection. The statement does not name the anomaly. It does not provide scientific explanation. The repositioning of military assets for public order this early in an event of unknown cause is noteworthy. It tells us that governments are already anticipating that the public response to prolonged darkness may not remain orderly. Meanwhile, from Beijing, the Chinese National Meteorological Center has issued a Level 1 emergency alert, their highest designation, across all 31 provincial-level divisions. This is significant. China covers an enormous geographic and climatic range. Issuing a nationwide Level 1 alert means they are not treating this as regional. They are treating this as total. I want to stress that we still do not have a cause. We have the shape of the event. We do not yet have its origin.
I'm holding a message right now from a listener who identifies herself as a teacher in Chongqing, China. She has given us permission to read this on air. She writes, I went to my classroom at the normal time. My students arrived. None of us said anything about the dark at first. Then one of my students, a little girl, asked me what time the sun was coming, and I didn't know what to say to her. I told her I wasn't sure. She asked if I thought it would be soon. I told her I thought so. I don't know if I was telling the truth. I don't know if that was wrong of me. I'm still at school. I find that message devastating in the most quiet way. That teacher making a choice in real time about what to tell a child, with no information, with nothing but instinct and the desire not to cause panic. This is what is happening in thousands of classrooms and homes and workplaces right now across half the world. People making split-second decisions about how much fear to show, about how much they know, about what is safe to say out loud.
Dr. Vasquez is now on the line with us. Dr. Vasquez is our senior atmospheric science correspondent. She holds a doctorate in atmospheric physics from the University of Zurich, and she has been analyzing the data that is currently available. Dr. Vasquez, thank you for being with us. What are you seeing?
And Dr. Vasquez, before you begin, I want to make sure our listeners understand, for those who may just be joining us, that you are speaking based on currently available data, which is incomplete, correct?
Dr. Vasquez tells us, and I'm going to summarize her technical explanation for clarity. She tells us that the data pattern she is seeing is consistent with a significant increase in stratospheric particulate matter. The stratosphere, for those who may need a refresher, is the layer of the atmosphere above where our weather occurs, roughly 10 to 50 kilometers above the surface. When particulate matter enters the stratosphere in sufficient quantities, it can remain suspended for years and scatter or absorb incoming solar radiation. The historical precedent most commonly cited is the 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia, which caused the so-called Year Without a Summer in 1816. But Dr. Vasquez is indicating that the particulate density she is reading from available satellite data is significantly beyond Tambora level. She is using the word unprecedented carefully, she says, because she does not use it lightly. She is also saying that we should not be seeing darkness of this magnitude this quickly from a volcanic eruption alone unless something of extraordinary scale occurred. She does not yet know what. She is working.
I think what strikes me about what Dr. Vasquez is describing is the word remained. She said particulate matter can remain suspended for years. Years. I want to be honest with our listeners that we are 3 hours into this broadcast, and the word years just entered our vocabulary, and I think we need to sit with that for a moment. Not to alarm, not to catastrophize, but to be honest. If what she is describing is accurate, this is not a phenomenon that resolves over the next few days. This is not something we wait out. This is potentially something that changes the terms of how human civilization operates. I am going to take a breath after saying that, because I don't want to say it carelessly. But silence would be a form of dishonesty that I'm not willing to practice right now. What I can also tell you is that we have listeners calling in from across Europe and Asia and Canada who are calm, who are helping their neighbors, who are going to check on elderly relatives, who are sharing generators and blankets. The human instinct toward care does not disappear because the sun does. We are seeing that in real time too.
We are now approximately 5 hours into our coverage. I want to update the verified casualty figures, and I want to be precise about what verified means in this context. These are deaths that have been confirmed by official emergency response services and attributed directly to circumstances created by this event. The current figure is 112 fatalities. The breakdown: 47 road traffic fatalities across China, Japan, South Korea, and Russia in the chaotic early hours as drivers, operating in unexpected darkness, experienced collisions at high speed. 22 cold exposure deaths in northern Norway and northern Finland, where temperatures in October are already near freezing, and where the absence of any solar warming, even at the margins, has pushed ambient outdoor temperatures below survivability thresholds for anyone exposed. 31 fatalities in Moscow attributed to crowd-related incidents as citizens gathered in public spaces, some of them panic-related, some of them crush injuries. 12 additional deaths in Tokyo involving falls and other accidents consistent with disorientation in unexpected darkness. 112 confirmed. I want to say clearly that this number will rise. It is going to rise significantly, and we will track it honestly.
That figure of 112 people, I need to say their names matter even if we don't know them. They are not statistics yet. They are people who woke up this morning not knowing this was the day their lives would end. The cold exposure deaths in northern Norway particularly stay with me, because those are people who went outside for normal reasons, to walk to a neighbor's house, to check on animals, to get to work, and found that the temperature had dropped in a way that nothing in their experience had prepared them for. There is no protocol for cold exposure deaths caused by the absence of the sun. Emergency services in Tromsø, which is above the Arctic Circle and is accustomed to polar night, are reporting that this darkness is different even from their winter norm. Their emergency coordinator, who gave a brief statement to our Oslo correspondent, said, "We know polar night. This is not polar night. Polar night still has the horizon glow. There is no horizon glow. The sky is completely dark, and it has been dark for hours past where it should have changed. I want to hold that distinction. These are people in a city that is literally named for the darkness of Arctic winter, and they are saying they have never seen anything like this."
We are receiving confirmation from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which has now issued a public statement. I'll read the relevant sections. The statement says, "Preliminary analysis of data from the GeoEase 18, Himawari 9, and Meteosat 12 geostationary satellite systems indicates an unprecedented concentration of particulate matter in the upper stratosphere, primarily in the layer between 22 and 40 kilometers altitude. The origin point of this material appears to be seismic and volcanic activity in the Yellowstone caldera region of the western United States, which began registering activity of extraordinary magnitude at approximately 14 hours and 33 minutes Greenwich Mean Time. Associated seismic and volcanic activity has been detected at multiple secondary locations, including Iceland, the Toba region of northern Sumatra in Indonesia, and the East African Rift Zone in Ethiopia and Tanzania. The combined eruptive output of these events is estimated to have exceeded anything in the human geological record. We are continuing to process data." End of statement. There it is. 4 simultaneous or cascading supervolcanic events: Yellowstone, Iceland, Toba, the East African Rift. Our atmospheric physicist, Dr. Vasquez, has been briefed on this and confirms that the particulate output of these 4 events acting in combination would be sufficient to produce exactly what we are observing. This is not a mystery anymore in terms of cause. The mystery now is duration, scale, and survivability.
The Yellowstone supervolcano. I know that name. I think most of our listeners know that name. It has been the subject of documentaries and disaster fiction for decades, and the consistent scientific message has always been, it will erupt again, but probably not in our lifetimes. I think of all the times that phrase, "probably not in our lifetimes," has been said, and I think of the people right now in Wyoming, in Idaho, in Montana, who are not hearing our broadcast because there may not be a signal. Our correspondent in Denver, Colorado, which is several hundred miles from the Yellowstone caldera, went off the air approximately 2 hours ago. We have had no contact since. Our correspondent in Salt Lake City, Utah, went silent approximately 90 minutes ago. We do not know what is happening in those cities right now. We do not have eyes there. What we do know from the NASA statement is that Yellowstone erupted. What that means for the people who live near it, in Cody, in Jackson, in Idaho Falls, in Pocatello, I don't know how to say this in a way that is accurate and does not break something in the listener. We don't know if those communities still exist in their current form. We simply do not know.
It has now been approximately 8 hours since the first reports of anomalous darkness began reaching international media. I want to give you the infrastructure picture as it currently stands, because this is evolving rapidly and will affect every aspect of the relief response. Power grids. Western China is experiencing rolling blackouts across 14 provinces, attributed to the collapse of solar generation capacity, which represents approximately 30% of China's current generating mix. combined with a surge in electrical demand as citizens in darkness attempt to heat and light their spaces. The German national grid has entered emergency management protocols after the simultaneous failure of several major cross-border transmission links, which operators attribute to extraordinary and sudden demand spikes. The United Kingdom's national grid has declared a Category 3 energy emergency and is rationing supply across industrial and residential sectors. Norway, which generates nearly all of its electricity from hydropower and is therefore relatively insulated from solar dependency, is nonetheless reporting that the sudden temperature drop is beginning to affect water flow rates in ways that could impact hydro generation within days if temperatures continue to fall.
I want to talk about hospitals because hospitals are where the most vulnerable people are, and they are going to become the front line of this crisis faster than almost any other institution. We are getting reports from hospital administrators in Warsaw, Poland, in Lyon, France, in Toronto, Canada, and in Seoul, South Korea, all describing variations on the same situation. The backup generators are running. The generators are designed for short-term use, a few hours, perhaps a few days at maximum. They are not designed for sustained operation over weeks or months. The fuel supply for those generators depends on supply chains that are already beginning to fracture as the transportation network responds to darkness and cold, and the fear that comes with both. A hospital administrator in Warsaw sent a message to our network affiliate and it was passed to us. She writes, "We have 240 patients currently in care. 47 of them are on life-sustaining equipment. Our generator fuel supply will last approximately 72 hours at current consumption. I have contacted the Ministry of Health. I was told to conserve and wait. I am asking, wait for what?" That question, wait for what, is going to be the defining question of the days ahead.
It has now been 14 hours since the first reports began. Casualty figures have been updated by international emergency coordination bodies. The current confirmed figure is 4,318 deaths. I want to walk through the categories because the pattern matters. Traffic-related fatalities now account for approximately 800 of those deaths across China, Japan, South Korea, Russia, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. Cold exposure deaths have risen dramatically. Northern Scandinavia, Iceland. And here I have to pause and note that Iceland is not simply experiencing darkness. Iceland is experiencing the geological aftermath of its own volcanic eruption, which the Reykjavik government confirmed approximately 3 hours ago. Ash fall across the entire island has been reported as catastrophic. We have very limited communication with Iceland at this point. Cold exposure deaths from Norway, Finland, northern Sweden, northern Canada, and northern Russia now account for approximately 900 fatalities. The remaining 2,600 deaths are attributed to a combination of factors: medical emergencies related to stress and cardiac events, accidents in industrial settings affected by power outages, and what emergency coordinators are diplomatically calling social disorder events in several major urban centers. The actual number of people who have died is certainly higher than 4,318. We are tracking confirmed figures. The true number is unknown.
Social disorder events. I want to unpack that language because it's the kind of clinical phrasing that can make you forget you're talking about human beings in crisis. What those reports are describing, from what I am reading across the wires, looting of grocery stores and pharmacies in St. Petersburg, Russia, which began approximately 5 hours after darkness set in, and which has spread across multiple districts. A riot at a fuel distribution depot outside of Beijing in which, according to our affiliate's local contact, dozens of people were injured as crowds attempted to access diesel fuel for generators. Gunfire reported in a neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois. And Chicago is, of course, in the American Midwest, not in the shadow of Yellowstone directly, but it is experiencing complete darkness and temperatures that have plummeted by several degrees in a matter of hours. I want to be honest and say that social breakdown under sustained darkness, sustained cold, and information uncertainty is not a failure of moral character. It is a failure of infrastructure. When people cannot see, when people are cold, when they do not know if the sun will ever return, when their phones start losing charge and the charging stations are dark, fear is a rational response. What people do with that fear is where character comes in.
We are now approximately 20 hours in, and I want to address something that our listeners deserve clarity on. The Toba supervolcano in northern Sumatra, Indonesia. The last time Toba erupted, approximately 74,000 years ago, it is estimated to have reduced the global human population to somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 individuals. It nearly ended our species. It plunged the Earth into a volcanic winter that lasted decades. What we are now being told by geophysicists who are analyzing the seismic data in real time is that the current eruption of Toba may not be at that full scale, but it is significant. Indonesia's Emergency Management Agency, BNPB, issued a statement approximately 3 hours ago indicating that the northern half of Sumatra is no longer accessible by air or sea. The ash cloud from Toba covers an area estimated at 1.2 million square kilometers. The Strait of Malacca, one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, has been declared impassable due to ash and debris. Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Penang, all of these cities are inside the ash exclusion zone. We have no direct communication with Singapore. The Malaysian government has declared a national state of emergency, and all available military assets are being directed to evacuation efforts in peninsular Malaysia. The number of people potentially trapped in the affected zones runs into the tens of millions.
Tens of millions of people. I want to stay with that for a moment because those aren't numbers on a spreadsheet. We're talking about the island of Sumatra, which has a population of approximately 60 million people. We're talking about the northern half of that island being under a volcanic ash cloud so dense that aircraft cannot fly. We're talking about people who cannot leave by sea because the sea itself may be compromised by the eruption. I received a voice message. It came through a patched satellite relay, and the audio quality is very poor, from a man who identifies himself as a school principal in a town called Barastagi in North Sumatra. The message is approximately 40 seconds long. He says, and I'm transcribing as I listen, he says, "I have 312 students. I have locked the school. We have wet cloths over the windows. I cannot reach the emergency services. The sky is not dark here because of the sun. The sky is dark because it is full. It is full of ash. I do not know what to do for these children. If anyone can hear this, please." His name is not given, and his station could not be traced. I don't know if he can hear us. I'm going to say to him and to everyone like him, we hear you. We are not turning away.
It has now been approximately 28 hours. We are 1 full day and 4 hours into this event. I want to give the global temperature picture because the thermal data is becoming one of the most important data sets we have. The global average surface temperature, as measured by satellite-based instruments, has dropped by approximately 1.4 degrees Celsius in 24 hours. That number sounds small. It is not small. For context, the difference between Earth's current average temperature and the last ice age is approximately 5 to 6 degrees Celsius. A 1.4 degree drop in a single day, sustained and potentially deepening, represents a rate of cooling that has no parallel in modern climate records. In the northern hemisphere, the effects are more pronounced. Moscow is reporting an outdoor temperature of negative 23 degrees Celsius. It is autumn. Moscow in October has never recorded temperatures that low. Helsinki is at negative 18. Warsaw at negative 14. Beijing, which is at a lower latitude and has somewhat different thermal inertia, is at negative 8, well below seasonal norms. New York City, which is still in the dark, is at -4 Celsius. Boston is at -7. The rate of cooling is not slowing. Dr. Vasquez, who has been modeling these numbers throughout our broadcast, said to me off-air approximately 1 hour ago, "The stratospheric loading appears to be more severe than the initial satellite data suggested. The models I am running are not producing reassuring outputs." I want to be honest with you. That is not a reassuring statement.
In the midst of all of this, and I find myself needing to do this regularly to look for the moments of human courage within the catastrophe, there's a story coming to us from a hospital in Osaka, Japan, that I need to share. The hospital's generator failed approximately 6 hours ago, and the administrative staff made the decision to attempt to manually transport the patients on life-sustaining equipment to a neighboring facility that still had power. This involved moving 8 patients through darkened corridors, through outdoor stretches in temperatures that were dropping rapidly, using hand-powered ventilation for those who could not breathe without assistance, with medical staff walking alongside and manually maintaining life support. All 8 patients arrived alive. The doctor who coordinated this, I only have her family name, Dr. Fujimoto, gave a brief statement to Osaka's city emergency team. She said, "We are doctors. This is what we do. We do not need the sun to be doctors." I find that remarkable. I find it remarkable because she is not pretending this is not catastrophic. She is simply refusing to stop doing her job. That's the kind of courage that does not make the news under normal circumstances because it is quiet and methodical and unglamorous. It is the courage of competence.
We have now passed the 40-hour mark. I want to give an updated casualty figure, and I want to preface this by saying that we expect significant revisions in both directions as reporting infrastructure in affected areas stabilizes or deteriorates further. The current figure from the International Emergency Coordination Consortium, which represents data compiled from 83 member nations, is 47,200 confirmed deaths. This represents a 10-fold increase in the confirmed death toll in approximately 26 hours. The breakdown by cause has shifted significantly. Cold exposure and hypothermia deaths now account for the majority, approximately 26,000 of those confirmed, disproportionately affecting elderly populations, homeless populations, and populations in uninsulated or inadequately heated structures. Medical system failures account for an estimated 8,000 deaths, primarily patients dependent on life-sustaining equipment when generator fuel ran out. The remainder comprises traffic-related deaths, accident-related deaths, and deaths attributed to violence and disorder in urban centers. The largest single incident, a fire in a residential apartment complex in Novosibirsk, Russia, in which residents using improvised heating sources caused a blaze that killed 412 people. Novosibirsk is in western Siberia. Its current outdoor temperature is -31 Celsius.
I want to talk about the children. I have been avoiding it for the past several hours because the weight of it is almost too much to carry on air without breaking composure. And composure is something I owe to our listeners. But I cannot avoid it any longer. UNICEF has issued an emergency advisory indicating that in the regions affected by severe cold and darkness, principally northern Russia, Mongolia, northern China, Scandinavia, northern Canada, and Alaska, the child mortality rate in unheated or inadequately heated structures is accelerating at a rate that is, quote, beyond the capacity of current emergency resources to meaningfully address. That is the language of an organization that normally chooses very careful, measured words about tragedy. Children experiencing hypothermia, children in hospitals where the generators have failed, children in orphanages and care facilities where the staff have done everything possible and it has not been enough. I am going to read a message from a listener in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, which is currently sitting at -37 Celsius, a temperature at which exposed skin freezes in minutes. This listener writes, "We have moved all of our neighbors into our largest room. We have one working stove. We are burning furniture. We do not know how long we can keep the room above freezing. There are 11 children here. Please do not forget Mongolia. We have not forgotten Mongolia. We are not going to forget Mongolia.
We are now at approximately 56 hours. I want to provide a structural update on the global response, because there is significant activity on that front even as the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency session, its third since the event began, and has approved Resolution 2847, which designates this crisis as a planetary emergency, a designation that has never been used before and which carries specific provisions for the suspension of normal peacetime restrictions on international military movement for humanitarian purposes. In practical terms, Russian, Chinese, Indian, and Brazilian military assets are being authorized to cross national borders for the delivery of fuel, food, medical supplies, and heating equipment without the normal customs and diplomatic requirements. The European Union has activated the Emergency Solidarity Mechanism, which pools strategic reserves across all member states. The United States, which is simultaneously dealing with its own internal crisis centered on the Yellowstone exclusion zone, a zone which is now defined as covering most of Wyoming, all of Yellowstone National Park, and significant portions of Idaho and Montana. The United States has nonetheless committed to international aid deployment and is operating out of bases in the Southern Hemisphere, primarily in Brazil and South Africa, which are currently unaffected by the darkness.
The Yellowstone exclusion zone. I want to make sure our listeners understand what that phrase means because it has been in the headlines for the past day, and I'm not sure we fully explained it. The Yellowstone caldera, when it erupted, created a zone of absolute devastation in its immediate vicinity. The pyroclastic flows, which are fast-moving currents of superheated gas and volcanic matter, extended outward in a radius of approximately 250 kilometers from the caldera. This encompasses most of Wyoming. The ash fall, separate from the pyroclastic flows, extends across nearly the entire continental United States west of the Mississippi River, though at varying depths and densities. Denver, Colorado, which we mentioned losing contact with earlier, is now confirmed by satellite imagery to be under approximately half a meter of ash fall. Salt Lake City, Utah, is estimated to be under 1.5 meters of ash. These are cities with populations of hundreds of thousands and millions of people respectively. The Federal Emergency Management Agency and the National Guard have attempted to reach the borders of the exclusion zone, but their ability to penetrate inward is severely limited by continuing seismic activity, by the ash density, and by the absence of usable roads. The casualty estimate for the immediate Yellowstone zone, the people who could not evacuate in time or who were not warned, is being given by FEMA in a range. I'm going to read the range: 200,000 to 1.2 million people. That range tells you how little they actually know right now.
We are now at 72 hours. 3 days. Let me give you the summary picture. The global confirmed death toll has now reached 247,000. I want to reiterate that this is confirmed. The actual number of dead at this point is certainly significantly higher, because entire regions have gone dark in a communication sense as well as a literal sense, and the dead cannot always be reported. The stratospheric particulate veil, the volcanic aerosol layer, has, according to Dr. Vasquez's most recent analysis, reached a level of coverage that is effectively global in the northern hemisphere and is extending into the equatorial belt. The southern hemisphere still has daylight, but the quality of that daylight has changed. Sydney, Australia, is reporting unusual orange-tinted skies and a reduction in direct sunlight intensity of approximately 30%. Buenos Aires and Cape Town are reporting similar effects. The aerosol is spreading. It is spreading via natural stratospheric circulation patterns, and it cannot be stopped. The question that Dr. Vasquez is working on, The question that every atmospheric scientist alive is working on right now is how long this veil will persist. The honest answer is that nobody yet knows. The models range from 18 months to 11 years. 11 years. I'm saying that number slowly because I need you to hear it.
In the context of what Alex just said, and I know that number, 11 years, lands very hard, I want to try to hold two things at once, which is something I've been trying to do throughout this broadcast. The first thing is the full weight of what this means. If the stratospheric aerosol persists for years rather than months, we are talking about a fundamental transformation of how food grows on this planet. Photosynthesis requires sunlight. Crops require photosynthesis. The global food supply system requires harvests. If harvests fail across the northern hemisphere, and they will fail, the growing season that should begin in spring will face a sun that delivers perhaps 20 or 30% of its normal intensity. Then we are talking about famine at a scale that makes everything else we've discussed today look like a prelude. That is the first thing. The second thing is this. We know how to grow food under artificial light. We know how to build greenhouses. We know how to work in difficult conditions. Human civilization has survived volcanic winters before, smaller ones, and it has adapted. The question is whether the adaptation can be fast enough, organized enough, and sustained enough. That is not a question of physics. That is a question of political will and human compassion, and whether we choose to treat the survival of our species as a collective project or as a competition for scarce resources. I genuinely believe we are capable of choosing correctly. I have to believe that.
It has now been 5 days. I want to mark this as a distinct shift in our coverage, because the immediate emergency phase is transitioning into what crisis management experts call the protracted emergency phase. The initial shock is over. The systems are adjusting, some of them successfully, some catastrophically. Let me give you the key indicators. The global food security situation. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization has issued a statement warning that winter wheat crops in Russia, Ukraine, China, and the United States, 4 of the world's largest wheat producers, are in immediate danger due to the cold and dark. Russia and Ukraine together account for approximately 30% of global wheat exports. The FAO estimates that if current conditions persist for 6 weeks, global wheat reserves will sustain the current world population at current consumption levels for approximately 4 months. After that, the calculation changes fundamentally. The global energy situation, coal and natural gas power generation, has surged in every country that has those resources, as solar generation has essentially ceased. Countries that had made the transition to renewable energy as their primary source, Germany, Denmark, the United Kingdom, significant portions of the United States, are facing the most severe grid crises. Countries that maintained large fossil fuel generating capacity, Poland, India, Indonesia's surviving regions, Russia, are better positioned in the short term, although Indonesia as a whole is catastrophically compromised by the Toba eruption zone.
The refugee situation has reached a scale that I want to describe carefully because the numbers are large and the individual stories are immense. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees is reporting that the current number of people who have been displaced from their homes by this event, either because of the cold, the ashfall, the volcanic exclusion zones, or the collapse of infrastructure in their home communities, is 170 million people. 170 million. For context, the largest refugee crisis in recorded history prior to this event involved approximately 60 million people. We are at nearly 3 times that scale in 5 days. The primary movements are northward to southward, as populations in the northern hemisphere attempt to reach more temperate zones in the southern hemisphere. Inward, as rural populations move towards cities which still have functioning infrastructure. And this is one that I find particularly poignant, coastal to interior, as low-lying coastal communities and volcanic ash zones abandon their homes. Turkey is currently receiving approximately 400,000 displaced people per day across its southern border. Greece has called for emergency European Union support as displaced people from Russia and Central Asia attempt to reach Mediterranean Europe by any means available. The Italian Coast Guard has rescued over 40,000 people from the Adriatic and Ionian Seas in the past 48 hours.
I want to read you a government statement that was issued 8 hours ago by the President of Iceland, because Iceland is a story that deserves its own telling and has been somewhat lost in the broader narrative. The statement reads, in full, "To the people of Iceland and to the world, the Republic of Iceland is no longer able to sustain its civilian population in its current location. The volcanic activity originating from the Eldgjá fissure system and the Katla caldera, in combination with the global stratospheric event, has rendered the habitable surface of Iceland compromised to a degree from which recovery is not feasible in the short or medium term. The government of Iceland has accepted the offer of the Danish government to provide emergency resettlement support in Denmark and Greenland. Evacuation of the civilian population, currently estimated at 372,000 individuals, has begun. We do not expect this process to be completed without loss of life. We ask that Icelanders, wherever they are, know that their nation's identity does not end with its land. Iceland will endure as a people, even if its ground cannot sustain us for a time. We ask for the world's compassion. We ask for passage. We ask to be received as neighbors." That statement was written by a head of state overseeing the evacuation of their entire country. I have been doing this work for 22 years, and I have never read anything like it.
The Icelandic evacuation has begun, and what I'm hearing from our correspondents who are patching through via satellite relay is something that is both heartbreaking and extraordinary. Families carrying what they can. Boats in the harbor. Not purpose-built evacuation vessels, but fishing vessels, private boats, anything that floats, all of them loaded and moving. The temperature in Reykjavik right now is -22 Celsius. Moving people across the North Atlantic in those conditions in any vessel is an enormous risk. And yet they are doing it because staying is a greater risk. A man named Gunnar who reached a relay station and got a message through says simply, "We are leaving. We are leaving our country. We are going. The mountain will not stop." He said it once more. The mountain will not stop. He did not say it with anger or despair. He said it with the flatness of someone who has already finished grieving and is now only moving. I don't know what to do with that kind of dignity. I only know that it deserves to be heard.
We are now at 8 days. The confirmed global death toll has crossed 1 million. I am going to say that again. The confirmed global death toll has crossed 1 million people. The International Emergency Coordination Consortium's figure, as of its most recent bulletin, is 1,104,316 confirmed deaths. The real number is estimated by mortality researchers to be significantly higher. Estimates range from 2 to 4 million actual deaths in the first 8 days, accounting for unreported deaths in communication dark zones. The leading causes, in order, hypothermia and cold exposure, medical system failure, the Yellowstone event, direct mortality, and famine-related mortality, which has already begun in the most isolated and resource-depleted communities, primarily in northern Mongolia, rural Siberia, and parts of northern Canada's indigenous communities. The 4 active volcanic zones continue to emit material. Yellowstone remains in eruption. Iceland's Katla remains in eruption. The Toba system in Sumatra has shown reduced but not ceased activity. The East African Rift eruption, centered approximately 60 kilometers south of Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, has displaced the entire population of that city, approximately 5 million people. and ashfall is affecting food production across the Horn of Africa.
I want to acknowledge something to our listeners that has been weighing on me. We have been on air for 8 days now, with rotating teams, and I have had only brief periods of sleep. Our technical staff are working around the clock. Our affiliate networks in affected countries are largely dark. We are operating with reduced information from an increasing number of regions, and that reduced information is not neutral. It tends to mask the worst affected places. The regions we are hearing least from are often the regions in the most trouble. I want to be transparent about that limitation. What I can tell you is that the Southern Hemisphere, and particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, south of the East African Rift impact zone, Latin America, Australia, New Zealand, and South and Southeast Asia below the Toba ash exclusion zone, these regions are currently functioning, frightened, and doing something extraordinary. They are becoming the world's lifeline. Brazil has opened its borders entirely for agricultural migration. South African ports are operating around the clock as staging grounds for global aid distribution. Australia has announced a doubling of food production targets using greenhouse and indoor growing methods. New Zealand's Prime Minister gave a speech 2 days ago in which she said, "The Southern Hemisphere did not cause this, but the Southern Hemisphere is going to do everything in its power to keep the Northern Hemisphere alive, because we are one species." That speech was broadcast globally, and it was heard.
We are at 2 weeks. The picture at 2 weeks is one of 2 distinct global realities operating simultaneously. I want to lay them out clearly. Reality 1. In the Southern Hemisphere and in the mid-latitude zones, roughly from the Mediterranean southward, from the American Sun Belt southward, conditions are difficult. The economics are strained. The sky is dimmed and tinted. But people are alive. Governments are functioning. Food is growing. And an extraordinary global aid mobilization is underway. Reality 2. In the Northern Hemisphere above approximately 45 degrees north latitude, which takes in Moscow, Warsaw, Copenhagen, Helsinki, the entirety of Canada above Toronto, the northern United States, conditions are approaching what climate scientists are calling civilizational stress threshold. Outdoor temperatures across a broad swath of Russia, Mongolia, northern China, Scandinavia, and northern Canada are running between -20 and -50 Celsius, far below what the existing residential and commercial building stock was designed for. The energy infrastructure in these regions is under extraordinary strain. The confirmed death toll at 2 weeks is 3,800,000 people. The estimated actual toll is between 7 and 12 million.
In the midst of the statistics, which Alex and I both know are essential and which I know can become numbing, I want to bring you a story from 3 days ago that I have been thinking about constantly. A group of approximately 800 people, predominantly elderly, who had been sheltering in a community center in Norilsk, Russia, which is 200 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle and is currently experiencing temperatures of -58 Celsius. These 800 people were reached by a convoy of military vehicles from Krasnoyarsk, which traveled for 31 hours through conditions that their commanding officer described as, quote, "the worst I have experienced in 24 years of Arctic military service." Every single one of those 800 people was evacuated. 3 of the military convoy drivers suffered frostbite. None of them died. The convoy commander, when asked about the mission, said, "They called for help on a radio that barely worked and we heard it. What else would we do?" What else would we do? I think that is the question this moment in history is asking of every human being alive. What else would we do?
We are now 3 weeks in. I want to give the full geopolitical status report, because this event is reshaping international relationships in real time. Countries that have received significant displaced populations. Turkey, 3 million. Germany, 2.1 million, primarily arriving through its southern corridor. Brazil, 4.7 million. India, 6.2 million, primarily from Central Asian nations. South Africa, 1.9 million. The international aid architecture has consolidated around three primary hubs: Sao Paulo, Brazil; Johannesburg, South Africa; and Sydney, Australia. These three cities are now the most strategically important locations on Earth. The UN has relocated significant operational capacity to all three. The Security Council is meeting daily. The global economic picture: financial markets in the Southern Hemisphere are operating under emergency protocols but are functioning. All Northern Hemisphere stock exchanges have been suspended. The global oil price has tripled, then tripled again. The price of wheat has increased by 400% in 3 weeks. Gold has been suspended from trading. Governments that retain functioning economies are spending at war footing levels, not on weapons, but on greenhouses, heating fuel, food preservation, and moving people.
I have been monitoring the listener messages throughout this broadcast, and I want to share a cluster of them that all arrived in the past 6 hours, because they represent something important. A listener in a shelter camp in southern Turkey writes, "I walked for 11 days to get here from my home in Almaty, Kazakhstan. I carried my daughter on my back for 4 of those days when she could no longer walk. We are here. We are warm. My daughter is sleeping. I have not slept yet. I wanted someone to know we made it." A listener in a greenhouse collective in Saskatchewan, Canada. Saskatchewan, which should be frozen and dark, but which has built an extraordinary network of heated growing structures, writes, "We have planted our 3rd cycle of greens this week. We are feeding 47 families from the structure. We were a wheat farm 3 weeks ago. We learned how to do this in 10 days from videos on satellite internet and from a retired horticulturalist in our community named Mrs. Petrov, who is 79 years old and cannot stop smiling when things grow. Mrs. Petrov, who is 79 years old and cannot stop smiling when things grow. That is the world I want to exist. That is the world that has a chance."
We have now been broadcasting continuously for 4 weeks. I want to step back from the moment by moment and give you the 1-month summary, because I believe our listeners deserve a clear-eyed reckoning with where we are. The global confirmed death toll as of this morning is 18,244,000 people. Mortality researchers have issued an estimate suggesting the true toll is between 25 and 35 million. This makes this event the deadliest in recorded human history in terms of speed of onset. For comparison, the 1918 influenza pandemic killed an estimated 50 to 100 million over approximately 2 years. We are at 1 month, and we are already at the lower bound of that range. The distribution of death has been catastrophically unequal. Russia has lost an estimated 4 to 6 million people, predominantly through cold and medical system failure. China has lost an estimated 5 to 8 million. The Yellowstone exclusion zone in the United States accounts for between 1 and 2 million. The Toba exclusion zone in Indonesia accounts for between 3 and 6 million. Iceland has been successfully evacuated, though at the cost of approximately 4,000 lives during the evacuation process itself. Ethiopia, particularly the Addis Ababa region, has lost an estimated 700,000 people in the ashfall and subsequent famine.
I want to be part of giving our listeners the full picture of what 1 month has meant, because it is not only death and loss, and I believe that saying otherwise would be a form of dishonesty about human nature. What 1 month has also produced: the largest peacetime cooperation between Russia, China, the United States, and the European Union in history, because survival is a more compelling motivator than ideology. It has produced an explosion of indoor and greenhouse agriculture that engineers are already calling the fastest technological deployment in human history. It has produced the evacuation of Iceland, the first successful evacuation of an entire nation in modern times. It has produced acts of ordinary bravery so numerous and so quiet that we will never have a complete record of them. It has produced a generation of children who are growing up knowing that the sky can change, that warmth is not guaranteed, that their neighbors, wherever in the world they come from, are the most important resource they have. I do not want to romanticize suffering. 25 to 35 million people are dead. But I also do not want to fail to see what suffering has revealed about what we are capable of.
And now I want to give you the answer to the question that has been underlying every hour of this broadcast. What caused this precisely, and how long will it last? The scientific community has now had sufficient time and data to reach consensus. The trigger event was the Yellowstone caldera eruption, which was itself triggered by a deep crustal seismic event originating in the subduction zone beneath the Pacific Northwest. Specifically, a rupture in what geologists are calling the Cascadia Interior Connectivity Fault, a fault structure that was not fully mapped prior to this event. The Yellowstone eruption triggered, through a combination of seismic wave propagation and pressure redistribution in the deep magmatic system, the simultaneous or near simultaneous eruption of the Katla system in Iceland, the Toba system in Sumatra, and the East African Rift Fissure system. These four events, acting together, injected approximately 5 billion metric tons of sulfur dioxide and volcanic ash into the stratosphere. For reference, the Tambora eruption in 1815 injected approximately 60 million metric tons. This event has produced a stratospheric loading approximately 83 times greater than Tambora. The models have now converged. The stratospheric aerosol veil will not clear in 18 months. The central estimate for meaningful solar recovery, meaning solar irradiance returning to approximately 70% of pre-event levels, is 7 years. Full pre-event solar irradiance recovery is estimated at 12 to 15 years.
12 to 15 years. I know what some of our listeners are feeling right now. Some of them will feel despair. Some of them will feel rage at the unfairness of it, because it is unfair, profoundly and cosmically unfair, to the billions of people who had no part in any geological process and who simply existed in the wrong place at the wrong time in history. Some of them will feel something quieter and stranger, a kind of grim relief that there is finally a number, that the uncertainty has an edge to it, that 12 to 15 years is enormous and survivable in a way that unknown was not. I want to speak to each of those responses and say all of them are correct. All of them are human. The question of 12 to 15 years is not simply whether we survive it biologically, though that is the most immediate question. The question is what kind of civilization we choose to be inside that time frame. The seeds of both answers, the answer where we descend into resource competition and tribalism, and the answer where we choose cooperation and ingenuity and care, both of those seeds are visible in the past 4 weeks. We have seen both. We will continue to see both. Which one grows depends on choices that are being made right now, today, by governments, by community leaders, by individuals in shelters, by farmers planting under artificial light, by doctors treating patients in buildings lit by generators running on rationed fuel.
Before we conclude this portion of our broadcast, I want to give you the clear territorial summary. Which nations and territories have been lost or fundamentally altered as a result of this event? Iceland. The entire nation has been evacuated. The island of Iceland is not currently habitable and is not expected to be habitable for a period of between 5 and 20 years, depending on continued volcanic activity. The Icelandic government exists in exile, headquartered in Copenhagen, and is maintaining its legal and governmental functions. The northern half of Sumatra, Indonesia. The Toba exclusion zone covers an area of approximately 500,000 square kilometers and has been designated uninhabitable for the foreseeable future. The Indonesian government, operating from Jakarta, which remains in the southern zone, has declared the northern half of Sumatra a national sacrifice zone and is focusing all resources on the evacuation and resettlement of surviving populations. The Yellowstone Exclusion Zone in the United States, an area of approximately 150,000 square kilometers centered on the former Yellowstone National Park, has been designated permanently off-limits. The states of Wyoming, significant portions of Idaho and Montana, are under ashfall that renders conventional agriculture and outdoor habitation impossible for an estimated decade. The United States federal government remains operational, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, which is above the significant ashfall line.
Those places, Iceland, northern Sumatra, Wyoming, they are not just geographic designations. They are places where people were born, where families built lives over generations, where cultures accumulated meaning over centuries. The Yellowstone region of Wyoming was the site of the world's first national park, a place that humans set aside precisely because of its geological wonder, never fully imagining that the wonder might turn destructive. Iceland was a civilization of 372,000 people who created one of the most literate, most peaceful, most creative societies in human history on a volcanic island in the North Atlantic. They knew they lived on a volcanic island. They lived there anyway because it was their home. I think of the Icelandic word "þetta reddast." It roughly translates as "it will all work out." And I think of how that cultural attitude, that particular Northern European pragmatism in the face of hardship, is going to be tested more severely than any of the people who coined that phrase could have imagined. I believe Iceland will work out. It will be different. It will hurt enormously. But it will work out.
Let me give you the final numbers and the final summary, because our listeners deserve a clear and honest accounting of where we stand at 1 month. Total confirmed deaths, 18,244,000. Estimated actual deaths, 28 to 36 million. The gap between those numbers reflects reporting failures in communication dark zones, primarily in Russia, Mongolia, northern China, and northern Canada. Countries that have been lost or rendered uninhabitable: Iceland, the northern half of Sumatra, the Yellowstone Exclusion Zone representing a large portion of Wyoming and adjacent states. Countries that have lost major portions of their functional territory: Russia, which has lost the ability to maintain permanent civilian habitation in the regions above 55 degrees north latitude. Canada, which has similarly lost civilian habitation capacity in its northern territories and much of its prairie provinces under ashfall. Indonesia, which has lost the northern half of its most populous island. Ethiopia and much of the Horn of Africa region, which is under the East African Rift ashfall shadow. Countries that are currently functioning as the core of global civilization: Brazil, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, India, Sub-Saharan Africa below the Rift Zone, Southern Europe, Turkey, and the nations of Central and South America. These are the regions that will anchor humanity's survival through the years ahead.
I want to end, and I know we are ending this phase of our coverage, though Silent Waves Radio will continue broadcasting indefinitely. I want to end with something that is not a statistic and not a government statement and not a geographic designation. I want to end with a letter. It was sent to us by a woman in Buenos Aires, Argentina, who says she listened to our broadcast for the entirety of the past month. She is a former teacher. She is 67 years old. She writes this: "I have listened to you for 30 days. I have cried. I have sat with neighbors and translated parts of your broadcast for those who do not speak English. I have planted seedlings in pots on my windowsill because I read that food growing would be needed. My windowsill now has 37 pots. I cannot explain why growing those 37 plants in 37 pots feels like doing something, but it does. I think because the sun still comes here. dimmer than before, a little orange, a little strange, but it comes. And I water the plants in the light of it, and I think about all the people in the dark places who cannot do this right now, and I send the growing toward them somehow in my mind. I don't know if that helps anything, but it is what I have. That is what she has. 37 pots of seedlings and the intention to grow food for people she will never meet, in a light that is dimmer than it used to be, under a sky that has changed. I think that is enough. I think that is, in fact, exactly enough.
This is Alex Mercer for Silent Waves Radio. You are listening to our 1-month summary broadcast of what has come to be called the Long Dark, the name that has emerged organically from the communities living through it, and that we are adopting as our operational term. The cause: the Cascadia interior fault rupture triggering the simultaneous eruption of 4 volcanic systems: Yellowstone, Katla, Toba, and the East African Rift, producing a stratospheric particulate loading of approximately 5 billion metric tons, 83 times the scale of the largest eruption in modern recorded history. The duration: 12 to 15 years before solar irradiance returns to pre-event levels, with the first significant improvement expected in 7 years. The dead: between 28 and 36 million confirmed or estimated in the first month, with mortality expected to continue through the first year as cold and food scarcity extend their reach. The lost: Iceland as a habitable land, temporarily. Northern Sumatra for the foreseeable future. The Yellowstone zone for a decade or more. The present: a world that is still here. A world in which governments are cooperating in ways they have never cooperated before. A world in which Brazilian grain is feeding Russian survivors and Australian engineers are teaching Mongolian herders to build heated growing structures, and a retired horticulturalist in Saskatchewan named Mrs. Petrov is smiling because things are growing. The world is diminished. The world has lost tens of millions of its people. The world's sky has changed and will not change back for a generation. And the world is still here. We are still here. And we are going to stay on the air.
I want to add one last thing, and then we will hand this broadcast to our next team. Throughout the past month, we have received over 3 million listener messages. 3 million. From people in shelters and in caves and in cars and in greenhouses and in hospitals running on generator power and in rescue vehicles driving through ash and in boats crossing cold seas. From people who are afraid and people who are courageous and people who are both at the same time, sometimes in the same minute. Every message that we received and did not read on air, and that is most of them, I want you to know that we read it. Someone at the station read your message. You were not shouting into silence. You were shouting into Silent Waves Radio, and we were here, and we heard you, and we are not going anywhere. The sun has not fully risen in 1 month. It will not fully rise for years. But this station will be here when it does. We will be here every day between now and then, telling you the truth as best we can find it, holding the voices of the people who are afraid, and the people who are brave, and the people growing 37 pots of seedlings on a windowsill in Buenos Aires. We will hold all of it. This is Sierra Lane. Stay warm, stay close to your people, and stay with us.
Silent Waves Radio. We are on the air. We are not leaving. Whatever comes next, we will meet it together. This is Alex Mercer, signing off from this phase of our long dark coverage and beginning the next one. Stay tuned.